going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice long
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe if you are out there on YouTube, and also rate the show 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast. What is good, everybody out there on YouTube and the podcast listening on your phones? What's going on? Sorry for the delay. For those that are watching on YouTube, you can see part of the reason for the delay is I'm in the new studio that we've been kind of putting together. And yeah, I already know that I need something to at least deafen some of these lights over here, some of the windows, but I'm excited about this. I also had a funeral, unfortunately, I had to go to, but I wanted to get this out and get it like a little bit more condensed, just so, because I know everyone that wants to listen, you kind of want to get it probably a little quicker so that you can listen to it right before the game. So we'll be previewing Bears versus the Commanders. So let's just get straight into this and talk about some of the injuries during this game. So the big part for the Bears, and this is where I wish I was live for this because that we could celebrate, because I know we were kind of calling for Velus and kind of curious to see what they were going to do. But ultimately, Velus Jones gets released, and also we saw Kari Blasingame get released as well. And part of the reason is because we are seeing Travis Homer and Jacob Martin coming off of injured reserve. And this is a big deal because like we've been saying, as they're starting to bring these players back, also look at like a Larry Borum, also remember Ryan Bates, some of these players that could potentially come back. This is why the Bears are more so going to be sellers than buyers coming up to the trade deadline, trying to get rid of some players without having to just truly release them. They probably wish that they could have gotten Velus for something, but ultimately you see these moves because, for one, we know that Kari Blasingame wasn't really out there, so really he was just a special teams player, and we know that Travis Homer, someone that we believe is a very good special teams asset. But then same thing, Velus, that seems like it was more so, hey, let's just move on from him. We couldn't get him for anything. There's no worms biting. See you later. So unfortunately, this former 3rd round pick just did not work out, and we see him move on. And honestly, good move by Ryan Poles. I wish he would have traded for it like at the very beginning, like what we saw with HBO, where just make sure if you feel like it's not going to work, move on, right? And that's ultimately what they didn't do, but moved on a little bit later. But now let's just keep on trucking forward. And speaking of that, the rest of the injuries that are out there, Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon are the main headliners with this, because with them being the only ones that are listed as out, or anyone with an actual designation, Brisker, Gordon, both out for the Chicago Bears. So that means Elijah Hicks again, and also Blackwell, which we will be talking about later. But let's talk a little bit more about the opponents with the Washington Commanders. Now, the Washington Commanders, pretty good. We all know the story kind of coming in with Jaden Daniels being this incredible quarterback that's playing, but it really boils down to what's going on with his chest. He's got this rib injury, and right now he's listed as questionable. He was limited on Friday, but ultimately will be a game time decision. As far as what I know right now, at 3:00 on Saturday, he's basically going to be a game time decision. So something definitely to watch out for. My personal take, because of Brandon Coleman, their left tackle, he's not going to be out there because of a concussion, I think it makes sense for them to just hold off Jaden Daniels. And as a Bears fan, I kind of want to see Jaden Daniels out there so we can kind of shut up some of those some people out there if Caleb plays better. But ultimately, the macho Bears fan inside of me, you throw that away. You want to see Marcus Mariota, who arguably is a worse quarterback than Jaden Daniels. You want to see him out there, not necessarily the best people, because you want to win. But yeah, you do want to go against the best of the best. But ultimately, as long as we come away with a win, that's all that I care about. But Jaden Daniels, we know he's injury prone. So yeah, I could see them ultimately trying to rest him out here, especially with missing their starting left tackle. So besides that, though, no one really missing. It's just going to be coming down to Jaden Daniels since Brandon Coleman is out. So before we get into their actual offense, let's talk about our offense, because Caleb Williams coming in, and Caleb Williams has been hot. And also when you look at this defense that they have, this defense is not great, even though it's underneath Dan Quinn. When you look at the metrics, they're 10th worst in points added in the run game. So yet again, advanced metric, that's kind of saying like, hey, not the best. So they're the 10th worst, but they're also the 12th. So what's weird is they're 12th best in pass defense per game, right? With 197 yards per game. When you look at that, you go, oh, they must have a good pass defense. But when you look at the advanced metrics, it tells you the other story. They're the 6th worst points, like the points contributed in the pass game from that pass defense. So what that means, you can attack them through the air, you can attack them on the ground. They've allowed 4.9 yards a carry, which is 6th worst. So yet again, this defense, even though it's underneath Dan Quinn, it's just not coming together. And when I'm listening to other Commander shows out there, they're saying the similar thing. They're like, listen, Dan Quinn's a good defensive coordinator. You can just tell that they need more time in the system, and then it's going to eventually come together. But this defense is no slouch. They added Bobby, even all that being considered, they still have some pretty key pieces. We all know that they have Deron Payne, and also they have Fowler at the outside defensive end, who's been pretty good. And Dorrance Armstrong is having a pretty darn good year as well. 37th overall defensive end according to PFF. But Bobby Wagner is going to be even though he's old, he's still a pretty darn good player, still knows how to tackle, and also they like to send him on the blitz. They like to send everybody on the blitz, and that's going to be a key to this game, is the blitz. They have the 8th highest blitz rate at 29.3%, and also have a pressure rate of 26.1%. So they are able to get to the quarterback. They're able to kind of create some pressure for Caleb Williams. And we've seen this defensive line play better and better and better. This is going to be another test, more so from the pass blocking perspective. Now, good thing, knock on wood, is that we've been a lot better at the blitz pickup. I remember when we were watching the tape the first couple weeks, it wasn't looking too hot. It wasn't looking too grand. But ultimately, they're putting it together. And part of that is the benching of Nate Davis. And actually, speaking of Nate Davis, that might be also what they're waiting on with Larry Borum. Just a key thing there on what they're going to do with Nate Davis. Because I could see him being the person that, yet again, all reports are is that Nate Davis is on the trading block. They're trying to trade him away. And if he's able to go away, then I feel like then that's when they're going to activate Larry Borum, because it feels like they like their offensive line. Everyone not named Nate Davis right now. So I think ultimately that's what they're going to do. But going back to this, the defensive line or the offensive line should be able to hold up pretty darn well. Now, Payne is still a good defensive tackle, even though PFF will tell you he's ranked as the 37th this year. He still is disruptive. He can still get to the quarterback. And also, don't sleep on Frankie Louvu, their linebacker. He is someone that has quietly been one of the upper tier linebackers in the NFL. And kind of gets slept on all the time. So this front seven is pretty good. They also have Johnny Newton, who's still nursing that foot injury that ultimately led him to drop into the second round. But this is where, how is this defense bad, right? It sounds like everybody's performing well. It's inside of this secondary where you have Igbenogany, who is the slot corner, and also St. Juice as an outside corner, and then Mike Sandstrill, the rookie out of Michigan. Now, Sandstrill honestly has not been that bad as a rookie corner, who I know a lot of us were projecting as more of a slot corner. But ultimately, when you look at this corner group, your wide receivers should be able to beat their one-on-one, should be able to go against these and win their matchups. And as we know, that's what's so key out there. So I'm looking at like a Roma Dunze, someone like that, to have a big game. That's what I'm hoping for, because this is another game. As long as they can keep on, also like with Keenan Allen, keeping that chemistry going, these wide receivers should be able to get it, included inside of this attack pretty early on. Because yet again, good linebackers, and Jeremy Chin, a safety that they were adding from the Carolina Panthers, has had a pretty decent year. He really kind of fell off after his first year in Carolina, but ultimately playing a little bit better. So yeah, look to those wide receivers. If you're Caleb Williams, look to your wide receivers. I think that that's ultimately how they're going to be trying to win this game is pick up the blitz, go for the wideouts. That's going to be my key to this. So let's talk a little bit about matchups. So what is my key matchup to watch out for in this game? And if I'm looking at this, because if I'm looking at the actual defensive line versus offensive line, that could be one of the big pieces because up in the middle, you have Payne, Armstrong, Fowler. And I want to say, I usually call off an offensive lineman, but I think it's going to be Sandstrill versus Rome Odunze. I think that's going to be the ultimate matchup to watch out for because if he can get the better of essentially their best corner, I think that that's going to be the biggest matchup, like the biggest win is going to be trying to hit them deep. And actually, that's going to be the biggest key is just trying to hit them deep. Hit your wide receivers, hit them deep, because that's something that the Bears just simply have not been able to do. But if I talk about X factor, who's my X factor on this offense that can really kind of take this to the next level? I'm going to go with Swift. And we've seen this week after week after week. And I jokingly have to continuously be down on Swift so that he keeps doing well. Because right, we don't want to all of a sudden make our mojo all of a sudden go away. But Swift is going to be my X factor because we've seen how this offense runs with him running the football well. And like I said, they're averaging almost 5 yards a carry when you're running against them. This is not a great run defense. Ultimately, to me, with Swift, that's going to be key. And also, you're going against Dan Quinn. Guarantee you, Dan Quinn's probably like, listen, we got to guard the cutback lane for Swift. This isn't just a Caleb Williams thing. This is a Swift piece that we can then try and stop because we still see this in the tape that he still doesn't like to go the designated hole. He likes to kind of do his own thing. That's kind of how he's built. He's that playmaker type of build where he's going to just go wherever he wants, wherever he feels like. And that's what he's going to try and do. But Swift ultimately is that X factor because the ground game's going, this offense will be going. But if you're out there on YouTube, let me know your X factor down below on the offensive side, who you think can take this to the next level. You can't say Caleb Williams. I won't give you a hard time for that, but feel free to put that down in the comments. But let's go over to this defense and talk about the defense a little bit more and break down this defense because this Bears defense needs to try and slow down this red-hot offense for the Washington Commanders. And an interesting stat, too, is that after week 8, I believe it's, week 8 on, we see the Cliff Kingsbury offense really kind of lose its wheels. And this is consistent in college. This is consistent in the NFL. For some reason, his offenses just turn into a pumpkin. It's the Cinderella story. They turn into a pumpkin at midnight. That's ultimately what ends up going on with this. And we're all hoping that this is when it ultimately turns into a pumpkin because when Mariota was out there for an injured Jaden Daniels, this offense looked exactly the same. This offense was still moving the football. This offense was still looking good. And it kind of puts more credit onto what Cliff Kingsbury is executing and doing out there. And when you look at this offense too, the wide receivers aren't that great. Luke McCaffrey is getting open, but he's not having a fantastic year. And Noah Brown is just a type of a wide receiver. Terry McLaurin is kind of that DJ Moore type of tier where I feel like he's that underrated player, but a true number one. Now, and I'm going to go to my matchup because this is usually the easiest matchups for us to point out. It's going to be Jalen Johnson versus Terry McLaurin. You put your best corner on their best wide receiver, force everybody else to try and beat you, right? They got Austin Eckler to catch balls out of the backfield, but have Noah Brown beat you. Have Luke McCaffrey beat you. Try and get those guys, have them get open. That's going to be the key thing for me because Jalen Johnson can lock down Terry McLaurin. I want to see that battle because it's going to be tough. It's going to be intense, but that's why you have your lockdown corner. Yet again, put him on the outside versus McLaurin. Everybody else, let them do what they can try and do because Zach Ertz does not look like the Zach Ertz back in Philadelphia. He's been slowing down, and you still see that slowness to him in his game. Definitely a shell of himself, but that's because he's like 34 years old. So totally get that. But let's also talk about how this defense can attack them. So like we said, this is a big passing team. They also like to run it with Brian Robinson, so a very big power back. Still kind of continues to, we need to also just ultimately stop the run. But when you look at this offensive line, a way that we can attack it is on the defensive end spots. Like we mentioned, Brendan Coleman is out there, left tackle. Wasn't having a great season, but now they're putting in Cornelius Lucas, a longtime veteran at the left tackle position. So might give them might be below average, but still someone you can attack. And same thing with Wiley, their right tackle. These tackles are where they're weakest, but in the middle, they have Tyler Biadasz, the center that a lot of us wanted the Bears to end up getting. I really liked him because he's just a true center. And right now he's the 10th highest graded center according to Pro Football Focus. And Samuel Cosmi, their right guard, that I always like kind of compare with Tevin Jenkins, because the Bears could have had Cosmi if they would have just stayed there, but ultimately traded up for Tevin Jenkins. But Cosmi is a very, very good right guard. And Allegretti, their left guard, is having a surprisingly good year. Yet again, talking about the whole pumpkin thing. Is he eventually going to turn back into Allegretti, or is he going to continue to play at this high level? He is currently PFF's 23rd highest graded guard in the NFL. So really, with all of this being considered, speaking of we'll just kind of, it's a couple days before Halloween. We'll stick with the whole turning into a pumpkin, because Hicks in Blackwell didn't have a fantastic game. I didn't think it was bad, but also he only had limited snaps. So hopefully Blackwell can come in, but Hicks played phenomenally last week, and PFF has him as a 77.4 grade. And I remember too, after the game, he was one of the players of the game, because he played phenomenally. He made some big time plays out there. Hopefully we can continue to see this out of Elijah Hicks. Now, ultimately, if you look at the longevity of the work, you should expect some regression, but I'm hoping, right? That's that Bears hopium, hoping that Elijah Hicks can at least have a pretty darn good game. But really, ultimately, when we're looking at matchups, Jalen Johnson versus Terry McLaurin is my key matchup, but then also someone who can just kind of take this to the next level, the X factor of the game. It's Montez Sweat. It's Montez Sweat going against his old team, where we have not seen the same Montez Sweat that we have seen last season, and even the same Montez Sweat that was over at Washington. And this is a huge game, because this is the team that didn't want him. And he had an interview, and he's like, it's good to be somewhere where you're actually wanted. And right now, we want him to have a big game. We need him to have a big game, because we just have not seen that out of Montez Sweat at all this year. So big game. That's what I'm hoping for, and that's why he is my X factor. And ultimately, next we have our special teams review, and not too much. I can just copy and paste this segment in a lot of these sessions, because it's just keep on doing what you're doing, Cairo Santos. And also, we have to look at who's going to be the long snapper too. We definitely have to think about that. But also Torrey Taylor, just hoping to have a good game. So let's talk about who has the edge for the Chicago Bears versus the Washington Commanders. And I think when you look at the Bears passing offense versus the pass defense for the Commanders, I got to give it to the Bears, because of what Caleb's been able to do. And this is not a great passing defense. And you have another week and just getting better and better and better. And also Caleb, this is a big game for him. And we know that he wants to play in these big games. This got flexed to the 3:00 spot. I expect him to have a big game. Edge to the Bears and the running attack versus their run defense. And hopefully I don't jinx them, but I'm going to give this to the Chicago Bears running attack on offense, because yet again, they're averaging almost 5 yards a carry given up for this Washington defense. You can attack them on the ground and really, really, really make it easy for your rookie quarterback, Caleb Williams. And then next, if we flip over to the defense, I think that the Bears have them from the passing side. The running side, I'm still up in the air. I'm going to give it to the Commanders because I still think Robinson, they're still going to try and run the football, even if it's Mariota, even if it's Jaden Daniels. They're going to try and establish the run. They're going to try and throw in a couple little options in there too. It's going to be hard. I'm going to give it to the Commanders because they do that very well, and the Bears' passing defense is just so good. So 3-1 Bears. I like the Bears in this spot. And for all those out there on YouTube, let me know your predictions down below with also one bold prediction. Because I think ultimately when I think about this game, I think that the Bears are going to do well. And it's scary because we're coming off of a bye, and I feel very optimistic. And then I was listening to other Commanders fans, and they're like, oh man, we got this. The Bears aren't that good. And both sides, we both feel like this could be a blowout, on both sides, just a 2-score game. And that's kind of what I'm feeling with this, is I feel like the Bears could win by 10 and just want to try and throw it on them because they're tired of hearing all this stuff. The defense wants to play for Montez Sweat, and the offense wants to play for Caleb Williams. I'm going to say Bears win. Let's see. 28-18. I'll go with that because I kind of want to have that 10 points. I'm going to say ultimately the Bears win. And I'm going to say 3 touchdown passes for Caleb Williams. And for my bold prediction, 3 touchdown passes for Caleb Williams and 2 sacks for Montez Sweat. So 2 mildly bold predictions parlayed into one bold prediction. So I hope that's bold enough for all of you out there. But ladies and gentlemen, that is our show. Thank you all so much. And if you haven't already, drop a like, subscribe, comment, whatever you want. It just helps out the YouTube algorithm tremendously. And also download the podcast wherever you get your podcast. And tomorrow, I will finally have, I'll probably be wearing my costume just because we're going out trick-or-treating right beforehand when we do our show tomorrow night. So hopefully we can see you there live for the show. It might be closer to 8 o'clock, so it'll be later, but we'll be on. Don't you worry about that. And with that, have a great, happy Halloween and Unbearable Sports Podcast. We are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair and you know